my imitation leather ISR here, just see how Paul's letters are doing in this translation. Okay, so we're going to do Colossians. All right, I think we're live right now. So Shabbat Shalom, everyone. I expect all of our brothers and sisters are having a great Shabbat evening. I know some of you are probably having atonement tonight. So those of you having atonement tonight, just wanted to say Chag, Mak, Yom Kippurim. If not, and you are keeping it when we're keeping it tomorrow night, I just want to also say to you guys, I hope you guys have a great and solemn, full, and very sober and humbling Yom Kippur tomorrow night. That's when we will be starting ours. So, ooh.
Sorry, my cat's Brett.
Oh no, it's okay. You can't control that. Sorry, I just want to make sure you're all right. Okay. No, you don't need to apologize for that. Let's see here. So we're going to be doing Colossians 3 and 4. I'm just using my purple imitation leather ISR here. So let me turn to the page here. 1147. So let me get there really quick. Okay. I think what I'll do is on the screen, I'll have the other versions like the Aramaic, so that I can kind of compare here. All right, so let's see here. This is very weird. Oh, there we go. Okay, Colossians 3 to 4. All right, let's go to shared screen really quick. Shared should be on. Okay, let's make sure I got my sword. Okay, so let's go to, I should have the Aramaic on here. Okay, let's go to Colossians 3. All right, so here we go. It says, if therefore you are risen with the Messiah, seek which is above, the place where the Messiah sits, at the right side of Elua, or the right hand of Elua. Feed on that which is above, and not which is in the earth. For you have died yourselves, and your lives are hidden with the Messiah in Elua. And whenever the Messiah, who is our life, is revealed, then you also will be revealed with him in esteem. So, Mom, does yours say salvation or deliverance?
No.
Okay.
No.
I'm just curious. Okay, because sometimes the Aramaic will say life rather than saved sometimes.
It says, who is your
Okay.
life?
Okay. Kill therefore your members that are in the earth, whoredom, impurity, diseases, which desires and greed. For because of these things, the anger of Elua comes upon his disobedient children. And you walked also in these things from the first, when you were employed in these things. But now put off from you all these things: anger, fury, wickedness, blasphemy, impure speech. And by the way, this would be profanity. Those that want to say there's no commandment in the Torah against profanity, if you look in, I believe it's the book of Proverbs. Proverbs talks about it a bit, about unfitting speech. So it is something in the Tanakh. Paul's not making it up. Okay. So just FYI, for those that say, well, there's no thus says you can't, use profanity. If you actually look in Proverbs and in Paul's letters, it's spoken about a lot in the Bible indirectly. It's talking about, unfitting words or speech. But now, from all you these things, anger, fury, wickedness, blasphemy, impure speech, neither should you cheat one another, but put off the old man with all his ways, and put on the new, who is made new by the knowledge in the image of, no, I'm curious to see what it says here. Just let me look at this real quick. and put on the new man, which is the renewed in the knowledge after the image of him that created him. Very interesting wording there. Where there is neither Yahudi nor man, or yours might say, nor no Judean or Gentile, neither circumcision nor uncircumcision, neither Greeks nor barbarians, neither servant nor free man, but the Messiah is all and every person. Put on, therefore, as the chosen ones of Elohim, and set apart, beloved, mercy and compassion, kindness, humility of mind, gentleness, and long-suffering. And he forbearing one another, to forgiving one another. But if anyone has an outrage against his brother, forgive, just as Messiah has forgiven you. And with all these things, love is the bond of perfection, and the peace of the Messiah will govern your hearts, to which you are called in one body, and give thanks to the Messiah. Teach and instruct your souls in the Psalms, that his word may dwell in you richly in all wisdom, and sing in your hearts with favor to Elohim in praises and songs of the Spirit. And everything that you perform in word and works, do in the name of our Master Yahushua the Messiah. Give thanks to him by Elohim the Father. Wives, be subject to your husbands, as that is right in the Messiah. Husbands, love your wives. Do not be bitter towards them. Children, obey your parents in all things, for thus it is pleasing before our Master. Now, what I want to say here, it is important to understand when it says in all things, that these things that he's referring to cannot be against Yahuwah's will. Okay. For example, does this verse in all things mean that I am supposed to obey my parents if they tell me to break the Sabbath? No. So it's important to understand the context of what Paul is saying.
I was forced to not keep the Sabbath when I was a child.
Yeah, that's definitely a different context when, you're a little child. Your parents are supposed to be the ones that are teaching you that. If they're not teaching you that, then they're causing you to break the Sabbath. And and also, I do think there is a age of accountability we get to. I don't believe a little child that's barely cognitive of knowing what's right and wrong can be judged for their parents forcing them to break the Sabbath. So that's another thing too.
I was 12 years old. I knew what the Sabbath was.
Oh, okay.
But I wasn't allowed to keep it. That was terrible.
Yeah. I definitely believe Yahuwah obviously gives us mercy for those situations that are out of our control. Parents, do not anger your children lest they lose heart. Servants, obey your masters of the body in all things. I like how the Aramaic says, it doesn't just say servants, obey your masters. It's talking about slaves here, by the way. It says, obey your masters of the body. A lot of people misunderstand this, and even the slave traders of the American slave trade misunderstand this. This is talking about Israel, okay? This is not an ecumenical commandment. He's talking about people of the faith. He's saying, obey your masters of the body of Messiah in all things, not outwardly as those who please men, but with a pure heart and in the awe of the Master Yahuwah. So I've seen people spin this like, no matter what, a slave owner has to be obeyed by his servant and all that, and slaves always have to obey their masters, which is actually not the case. You see in Torah, there's a law that says if a slave is fleeing from their master, they're going for refuge from their master. They're disobeying their master by running away, and it's not sin. So this is where context comes into play, because Yahuwah says of the body in this verse. He's not talking about Gentile slave traders and Gentile heathen masters, because by default, a Gentile heathen slave trader is not going to treat his slave the right way. So it's important to understand this. I like how the Aramaic says of the body in verse 22, because obviously that's the context.
Mine says, servants obey your masters according to the flesh in all respects.
Yeah, it's the Greek. I think whoever originally did the Greek New Testament, when they were translating either from Aramaic or Hebrew, was starting to put their own doctrines into it. Like, no matter what, a slave's got to obey their master, no matter what. And you see what happened with the American slave trade, how they twisted that verse and made the African American slaves feel guilty. Why? Because they didn't want to be mistreated, so they ran away. In Torah, it says they're supposed to. If you look at Torah, we are supposed to take care of those that actually run away from their masters and protect them. So if Paul's not going to contradict the Torah, then obviously we don't understand that verse. Yeah. And the Greek is part of the problem. The Greek version is making it very generic. It's just saying, obey your masters according to the flesh. Now, even according to the flesh, though, I could argue if it's talking about ethnic flesh, then that's not ecumenical either. So I could argue if it's talking about according to the flesh, literally, that would mean that it's talking about fellow Israelites, right? Your ethnicity is your flesh. So, I could still see that as being talking about only of Israel. I can still see that, but it's because when we look at according to the flesh in the church, we've been taught a universalist concept. And that's not, part of the problem is the way the church has taught us. They taught us everything applies to everyone. And so we don't know how to use context. So the Greek seems to actually agree, if you understand according to the flesh is referring to their own flesh, their own ethnicity. So for example, Paul says, right, about the Yahudi and the Benjamites, he says what? He says, I want to save who? My brothers of the what? Flesh. What is he referring to? His ethnicity, his nationality as his flesh. So it's important to understand that. So good point, though, brought up by Brother Dennis. That was a good point. I still say the Aramaic's a little bit clearer, especially for us modern English speaking people. But that's one of the verses I believe that really have been warped by Christianity, and especially those of the American slave trade. So, see here. And do all that you do with all your soul as for our master and not as for the children of men. So it says, do everything you do with all your, basically referring back to the 10 Commandments, to love Yahuwah with everything you got, same thing. As for our master and not as for the children of men. So meaning, like, even when you work at a job, do it with everything you have, like you're worshiping Yahuwah with all your heart, mind, spirit, and soul. That's what he's trying to say. And know that you will receive from our master a reward in the inheritance, for you serve the master Yahuwah Messiah. This is another reason I like the Aramaic. You can't get around the oneness in the Peshitta. It's impossible. So instead of it just saying Yahusha Messiah, it actually says the master Yahuwah the Messiah. And we see that clearly is talking about giving us our inheritance. It's even saying that he's the one that gives us our inheritance, but we see in the Tanakh that the Father is the one promising to Abraham the inheritance. So it's very interesting. So Yahusha gives us our reward and inheritance. But he pays the wicked according to what he does wrong and there is no favoritism. Another important thing here. Yahuwah has no favoritism. He will treat his own people, if they do wickedly, like the wicked. And we see that. We see that in the book of Acts, chapter 7, by the way, that when Stephen is rebuking Israel, or rebuking the Pharisees specifically, he talks about how Yahuwah basically gave them into a reprobate mind to serve the host of heaven. If you know the Tanakh, at the Tower of Babel, that's what he did to all the other nations. So Yahuwah's judgment is probably the only ecumenical thing you can say in Yahuwah's character. That's the only universal thing in Scripture is his judgment. He's going to judge us just as strictly as he judges the nations. That is probably I would say that's the only thing ecumenical in the Scriptures, universalist in the Scriptures, as far as that goes. Anything else about Yahuwah's character? He's very exclusive, not inclusive. But when it comes to his judgment's equal. So, but anyway, so that's what I took from that chapter. But I really like how the Aramaic, for the most part, reads this chapter. It makes it very clear what it's saying. So, yeah. The only issue I have with the Greek is verse 22. Because we have a misunderstanding. We look at the word flesh and we kind of just look at it. That just means humanity as a whole is the problem. So we don't even think of it, but it could be talking about like specifically the person's family or, you know, their ethnicity. So anyway, all right. Brother Dennis, would you like to read chapter 4 for us?
I can. Can you hear me okay?
Perfect.
All right. Masters, give your servants what is righteous and fair, knowing that you also have a master in your mind. Continue in prayer, watching therein with thanksgiving, praying at the same time also for us, that Elohim would open to us a door for the word to speak the secret of Mashiach, for which I am also in chains, so that I make it clear as I should speak. Walk in wisdom toward those who are outside, redeeming the time. Let your word always be with favor, seasoned with salt, so that you know how you ought to answer each one. Tukanos, who is a blood brother, a true servant and a fellow servant in the master, shall give you all the news about me. I am sending him to you for this purpose, to know your circumstances and to encourage your hearts. With Onesimus, a true and beloved brother, who is one of you, they shall let you know all the news here. Aristarchus, my fellow prisoner, greets you, with Mark, the relative of Barnabas, about whom you received instructions. If he comes to you, welcome him. Also Yeshua, who is called Justice. These are my only fellow workers for the reign of Elohim, who are of the circumcision, who were to me a comfort. Epaphras, who is one of you, a servant of Mashiach, greets you, always wrestling for you in prayers, so that you stand perfect and complete in all the desire of Elohim. For I bear him witness that he has a deep concern for you, and for those who are in Laodicea and those in Hierapolis. Luke, the beloved physician, and Damas greet you. Greet the brothers in Laodicea and Nympha and the assembly that is in his house. And when this letter is read among you, see that it is read also in the assembly of the Laodiceans, and that you likewise read the letter from Laodicea. And say to Archippus, see to the service which you have received in the Master, so that you complete it. This greeting is in my own hand. Shaul, remember my chains. Favor be with you, so be it. Some of the names here were a little bit rough. You there?
So give your servants what is righteous and fair. So Paul does clarify himself that it's a two-way street with servants and masters, knowing that you also have a master in the heavens. Continue prayer watching there and thanksgiving. Praying all the same time for us that Allah would open us the door for the word to speak the secret of Messiah, which I am also in chains. So Paul seems to be in prison when he's writing this.
Yeah.
Outside redeeming the time. I like that. I always liked this verse 5 here. It's always my favorite verse of the chapter because we can all relate to verse 5 there. How we wasted so many years. And I know there's been, I forget if Christianity tries to say this. I know there's a saying from somewhere there. Well, it was never time wasted. I would disagree because I know some churches preach that. They preach that, oh, our time wasn't wasted. Yeah, it was. It was, regardless that it was Yahuwah's timing, it still was wasted. We were wasting our time living like the world does. So,
Yeah.
Let your word always be with favor, seasoned with salt. So this is interesting. A lot of us who know the Levitical law and everything, this is talk. He's like, Paul here is kind of like, he's taking a spiritual, and he does this a lot because, he's a former Pharisee. He knows the law like the back of his hand. He takes a spiritual concept from the Torah and applies it to his own writings. So he says, let your word be seasoned with salt. What does Yahushua say? We are the salt of the earth.
Yeah.
What did the Levites have to put on the loaves as offerings? Salt.
Mm-hmm.
They see, a lot of us don't catch it because we haven't been raised with the Torah. He's saying this for a reason. Because when you look at the I think it's the week of unleavened bread, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's the Passover week, the week of unleavened bread offering, they would have to put physical salt in the bread, in the dough, and then bake it. So offerings to Yahuwah in the sacrificial system needed salt. Never omit the salt. A lot of us don't catch this, but this is on purpose. Paul's doing this on purpose, and Yahushua does this on purpose.
Yeah, he says, don't forget the salt. It's the purifier.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting how Yahushua spiritualizes the salt in the context of that when we speak, we need to, not lose our seasoning. Right. And this is what Paul's talking about too. So it's kind of interesting. We are living sacrifices. So one of the other reasons we need to be salted with our words, so that you know how you ought to answer each one. Timothy, I think that's Timothy, right? Tuchikos. Wonder who that is. I wonder if that's supposed to say Titus in the Greek. Tuchikos, a true servant, fellow servant of the master shall give you all the news about me. I have a feeling that's Titus, and they tried to find the best Hebrew name there for him. I think that
actually sounds Greek to me. Tychicus.
Yeah, Tychicus. I'm sending him to you for purpose. I know your circumstances do encourage your hearts. Okay. Let's see here. Where's the last page here? Okay.
You know who Onesimus is.
Onesimus.
Son in
oh yeah. You know all the news here. Aristarchus, my fellow prisoner, greets you with Mark, the relative of Barnabas. I never realized. Oh. Thank you. I never realized that Barnabas and Mark were related. Is that the same Mark?
Yes, that's John Mark, the
Really?
one that actually Paul and him unfortunately parted ways
Okay.
over John Mark. Yeah.
And there's another Yahusha here in verse 11. It says,
Yeah.
Yahusha, who is
Yeah.
called Justus or
Yeah.
Yahustus.
Yeah.
These are my only fellow workers for the reign of Elua, who are of the circumcision, who were to me a comfort. Now, just to explain too, it's important to understand when it says of the circumcision, it doesn't only mean they're physically circumcised, it actually means they're of the
Right.
sect. So what you got to understand is in Phariseeism, there was a traditional rabbinical tradition of people calling themselves of the circumcision.
Mhm.
So basically, Paul, mind you, former Pharisee, he becomes a believer in Yahusha. And what he's trying to say is these guys I'm mentioning in verse 11, they're also from that same sect of the circumcision. So most likely these guys came out of the circumcision party that you see being talked about in Paul's letters, where Paul is like sick to death of them, of all their rabbinical traditions and all that, where he's like, I wish they would just castrate themselves and all that. So yeah.
I wonder where they get that name, Justus.
Yeah, I don't know. That's definitely a Greek, probably
Oh,
a Greek replacing what it would have been in the Hebrew.
Yeah.
It's weird that the ISR keeps that in there. It's kind of funny because
Mm-hmm. It's interesting too because there is a Justus family in Italy, Greece, and some of them have actually produced popes. And I read that this gave me this in a strange way. I was watching something years ago, and it mentioned that it was about a car show, and they were talking about the Justice family were restoring a truck, and that they were part of the mafia too, and they produced popes.
Yeah, it's very
and of course, over here, we have the justice system, which comes from Italy. It's the best system money can buy. It has nothing to do with righteousness.
It depends where they would have been born, these two guys that are following him. Even if they're of the circumcision, they could have been Benjamites or Judeans that grew up in Rome with him. Because he is a Roman citizen. So
right.
Thinking of is if they're raised in a Hellenistic or Roman world, they would have been given a Roman or Greek name rather than a Hebrew name. Probably would happen. Kind of like how Timothy is really not a Hebrew name. One of his parents was Greek, and so that's possibly what could have happened. I find it interesting though. It says he's called Justice. So it seems like his Hebrew name was the same as Yahusha's, and that other people called him Justice. So maybe kind of the same thing where Shaul would go to places, Greek-speaking places, and they would just call him whatever they wanted to call him. It says that Shaul, who also is called Paul, and then Kepha, it would say sometimes he would, he would be called Simon by other people. So it's very possible that that was just a name the Greeks and Romans called him. But let me see here. Epaphras, who is one of you, a servant of the Messiah, greets you, always wrestling for you in prayers, for that you stand perfect and complete in all the desire of Elua. For I bear him witness that he has a deep concern for you and for those who are in Laodicea. Now, we could spend a whole evening about what this means. What this means here. It says that for those who are in Laodicea and those in Hierapolis. Now, Laodicea is one of the places that, actually, one of the assemblies that Yahusha tells them to repent and that they're lukewarm.
Yeah.
It's funny that Paul has concern, or it's this brother of Paul's has concern for those that are in Laodicea. So you kind of see a foreshadowing to what it says in Revelations. Also, it's been rumored too. This is just innuendo, rumor. I can't say I know for a fact it's true or not. But it was rumored that there was supposedly, the legend or fable you could say, is that there was a council of Laodicea, and in that council there were certain books that the Laodicean assembly decided should be in the Bible and should not be. Funny to note, Revelations almost got the axe in that council. Also, though, what a lot of people gloss over is that part of the legend was that they are to blame why Enoch never got in the Bible. A lot of people don't know about that. A lot of people don't know that the Laodiceans are blamed for that. According to this legend, it's called the Council of Laodicea. Was the name of it. Now, a lot of people want to say it's just legend, it's just a fable, but it is. Others believe that this council could have happened, even though we don't have any proof for it. We don't have no physical, tangible evidence to prove it happened.
I've heard of that too, and I would call it, it's like they're trying to deceive people. I used to call them lousy deceivers.
Yeah, so a lot of people don't realize about that there was back in the day a contention about whether or not Enoch should be in the Bible. And there was contention back then, and there even was within Catholicism even debates about it, whether it should be in the canon or not. There different so-called Cirque fathers disagreed with one another. There were some that believed Enoch should have been included with Genesis to Revelations, and others didn't. So a lot of people don't know about that history. But anyway, let's see here. So, Green's brothers in Laodicea and Nympha and the assembly that is in his house. Now, this is what I like here. It says in his house. A lot of people don't catch that. Assemblies in the times of the apostles, they were not going to synagogues. They were going house to house.
Yeah.
This whole idea, this messianic, and I'm not trying to poke fingers, guys, but is to be historically accurate. The apostles, after Yahushua's ascension, they were not really following that synagogue tradition anymore. They were more or less going house to house, house to house. They were not having big gatherings. This whole idea in the messianic communities out there that want to have huge gatherings, like 300, 400, 500 people, they were not doing that. They were, they were actually, it seems like they refrained from doing that and got away from the synagogue system. You really don't see, you only see them going to the synagogues to witness to their brothers, but as far as congregating with believers in Messiah, they really were not using synagogues for that. And a lot of people forget about that in the time of the apostles, like the 1st century and 2nd century on, they kind of went against the whole synagogue system. They were not doing that anymore. You would have someone at Paul's house one night, someone at Kepha's house another night. That's how they did it, house to house. And so a lot of people don't realize that, and that's why my personal conviction on it, I don't believe in big, huge, feel the need to have to rent a non-501(c) building just to have, 500 people there, or whatever. I'm just exaggerating, but just making the point that they were not doing stuff like that. That didn't come along until really the idea of having big buildings where you had huge gatherings of people inside a physical building as followers of Messiah. You don't get that until Christianity comes around. You really don't get that as far as the Nazarenes go, they were not doing that. The Nazarene were not doing that. So just something for you guys to look into. This whole Messianic Jewish understanding of big, huge gatherings under a roof and this and that, these traditional, well, we need to have a building fund and it's this and that. Like you might as well be in the church still, in my personal opinion.
Yeah.
So that's just how I feel about that. But anyway, that's just my little 2 cents on that. But if you look in the book of Acts and other places in the Brit Hadashah, you'll see what I'm telling you is the truth. So, but anyway, yeah.
I'm just sitting here thinking, and it just kind of spoke to me as we're talking about this. The apostles, what Yahusha was making points very much so as his ministry was coming to, the peak time. Be careful of the Pharisees. Be careful of the hypocrisy of the, be careful that you don't let them, affect you. And they probably were thinking, well, the Pharisees were going to be in these physical buildings, the Pharisees would be in the temple, probably in a lot of the synagogues. They probably wanted to get as far away from those people as possible to continue on in the faith. It's just a thought.
Yeah. So it's funny. The end of this chapter really is focusing on the Laodiceans here. It says, among you that when this letter is read among you, see that it is read also in the assembly of the Laodiceans, and that you likewise read the letter from Laodicea. Now, this is a reference to a book we don't have by Paul. Supposedly, people have claimed that. Well, supposedly the rumor is also that it possibly could have been written by Clement or whatever. There is a apocryphal book known as the Letter to Laodicea or the Epistle to the Laodiceans. I don't know how valid that book is. I think sometimes these people, believers in the 1st or 2nd century, would read verses like this and they felt the need to, okay, let's make a book about the letter to the Laodicea. But as far as a legitimate letter to the Laodiceans that he's talking about, I don't think we have that today. That's just my personal opinion on it. But anyway, verse 17 here, we talk about Archippos, see to the service which you have received in the master so that you complete it. This greeting is in my own hand. Shaul, remember my chains. Favor be with you. So be it. So again, he says, remember my chains. Now, this goes back, I think, in the book of James, or I forget which book, where it says, remember those of the master who are in prison, and all that. But, yeah, this is very interesting. Very interesting last 2 chapters there. So hopefully you guys got some edification out of those chapters. We're just going to end it there only because we want to have a clear beginning for Yahusha willing, next week when we start our next book. I actually got to figure out anyway. I haven't had a chance this week. I was really getting ready, trying to prepare mentally, spiritually, and all that for Yom Kippur this weekend. So I had a lot going on this week, and I didn't really get to look to see what book we're doing next. So I got to go to my Bible chart to see chronologically what book was next after Colossians. So please stay tuned, everyone. Yahuwah willing, we'll be back next time. And all of our brothers and sisters out there, I just want to say Shabbat Shalom. Hopefully you guys, I hope you guys enjoy Abba's rest and get rejuvenated and energized. And those of you that will be keeping Yom Kippur the same night as us, that we keep reminding ourselves about reflection, to annul ourselves, humble ourselves, to afflict ourselves, and really, just this point in time, more than anything else, is a time of repentance, humbleness, and really just, coming to the mercy seat of Messiah. That's what this whole appointed time's about. So hopefully you guys will be with us tomorrow. If not, have a great Yom Kippur. Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Oh, okay. Take the recording off here.